Hello, and I'm Dr Shami. I'm an integrative GP here in Melbourne. And today I'm here with Dr Robert Szabo. And he's also an experienced GP in Melbourne, but also the founder of the Low-Carb Clinic. Dr Robert Szabo is also presenting at the next ACNEM conference in May 2019 here in Melbourne. And what I want to start by saying is, Rob, I love your topic. It's called Nutrition and Fasting, How to Put Together the Pieces for the Reversal of Type 2 Diabetes. Now, I know many practitioners are actually not aware that type 2 diabetes can be reversed, and I feel this message has to come out to many more. So, Rob, how and when did you realise type 2 diabetes can be reversed?
Thanks, Shami. Look, it's as you say, this is an area of medicine that I think is not probably has been well taught over the last, years, decades. And so that you're right, there's a lot of practitioners that are not aware of just how easily reversible type 2 diabetes is, which is really quite phenomenal because of the fact that it's just taking over the world with its, chronicity and the impact. For me, that was the case as well. I mean, I graduated in 99 and wasn't aware of this until about 5 years ago. So I'm fairly new to the knowledge that type 2 diabetes is reversible. It's been a very intimately personal experience for me because of my own diagnosis of type 2 diabetes when I was 37. So that's just 6 years ago now. And as you could imagine, for an otherwise 37-year-old, I was pretty shocked, and I thought I was looking after myself, and it really came out of the blue. So that was the initial experience, and then it was actually sort of a gradual realization in terms of the reversibility of type 2 diabetes. That a friend of mine had been to a low carb down under conference and came to me and said quietly, "I've been to this conference, and it's almost like a cult. And there's these low carbers who are talking about being able to reverse type 2 diabetes." And my ears pricked up, and I went and did loads of research and watched lots of YouTube lectures, read heaps, and realised that it's actually quite sound. And then put it into practice myself. And I was on metformin, but just decided to one day stop metformin, stop carbohydrates myself, and monitor myself very closely. And I guess, I felt confident doing that with my medical training. And my blood sugars were basically normal. And instantly. And so that was quite a revelation to me.
And what was the time frame from starting that diet to seeing the change in the blood sugars?
The same day.
Incredible.
That quick.
Wow.
But the thing is, there's been a gradual improvement that's been over years as well. So you do see, I personally saw, a really quick improvement, which is what a lot of my patients say as well. But there's been an even greater improvement that's been more gradual. So incorporating intermittent fasting has been probably the most important part of that slow but steady, gradual chipping away that I've been doing. And that just keeps on getting better and better.
So when you started the low-carb clinic, was it motivated by your own personal experience?
Yeah, absolutely. That was part of it. There was also the fact that I'd started to speak to my own patients in general practice about this. And I felt like I'd reached saturation point with the people that I had contact with. And I thought, look, this needs to be broadened, and I need to try and bring this to a bigger population and a bigger audience, because it's so potent, so powerful, and really so transformative in terms of health.
So when I was reading your profile, you also mentioned not only diet, but also lifestyle, social connection is really important. How do you bring that into your consult? Is it something that you deal with initially, or do you do it in stages?
It's really very much woven into the very beginning of the consultations, because none of these factors, our diet, our physical activity, our social connection, our emotional vulnerability, all of these things are interconnected intimately. People eat when they're stressed. People feel great when they physically move, and they're less likely to emotionally eat. So all of these things are very much interconnected. I guess, how well a dynamic is at home is going to have an impact on somebody's ability to change their nutrition. So there's all these things are really intimately connected, and I talk about them from the beginning. And I guess, depending on the patient as to where I put the focus. But look, I guess and the fantastic thing about my experience is that learning about nutrition and how potent it is, which kind of surprised me, to be honest, because that wasn't the impression that I was given in medical school. That has really sent me about on a journey that has taught me about all these other interplaying factors. And, I guess it's exciting to be able to actually guide someone to health and not just patch them up.
So, Rob, I'm sure as a practitioner, you face some challenges when you talk about lifestyle changes, making dietary changes. How do you manage the challenges in a consult?
Yeah, they're pretty huge, and they're unique for everybody, each individual. And there's factors like the food environment, which is really difficult to navigate. So I talk about the fact that this will be a navigation. It's not like you can walk out of here and expect everything to be available for you and out there. You need to actually start to get a bit savvy. It's important, I think, when people are emotionally eating for them to stop and think, why am I actually putting this food in my mouth? Because there's a good reason. Often it's difficult to confront that, and which is why it hasn't been done yet in that person's life, because they need to confront the fact that they're having difficulty in coping with X, Y, Z that's happening in their lives. So in a gentle way, stopping and just thinking, reflecting on what's the reason for eating that chocolate or whatever it happens to be, is great as a starting point, because it then gives you the power to step back and say, well, what are my options? Because that's not my only option to be able to cope. Smokers will tell you that they smoke because their lives are so stressful. The news flash is there's lots of people with really stressful lives that don't smoke, right? So that can be applied to chocolate bars too, and we need to step back and think, what are my options? How am I going to cope with this stress? And psychology and of eating and figuring out ways that are going to be alternative stress management tools is critical if you want to, fix your emotional eating, for example. So all these things have really got strong interplay. And so that's I guess addressing those is a big part of the challenge.
Fantastic. So, it's really hard to change habits. How do you motivate your patients? What kind of secret tips do you have?
Great question. Something that I'll often start with is to talk to people about something that they can't do right now because of their health that they would like to be able to do. So whether that might be travel, and they may not be able to because they're overweight and their knees sore, or they might really want to be able to live a lot longer to experience their grandchildren growing up, but their health is deteriorating. So, what are some of those motivating factors that they can refer back to when they're feeling a bit emotionally weak or susceptible to going back to their old ways, that they can use as a benchmark, as a goalpost to guide them as to why they're doing this, and keep coming back to, that's my goal, and I'm working towards that practical goal. So I think when we're talking about improving health, it's really important to talk about what are the things that we want out of our lives, because ultimately that's why we want health. We want to be able to do the things that are going to make us happy. What are those things? Thinking about identifying them, and then just keep on referring back to them.
Fantastic. So it sounds like nutrition and what you're doing is extremely personal. Each patient will have their own goals, and it's so important, to not box people up in one category, and realize that the journey that you take with each patient is actually quite different.
Correct.
And it's sort of like an art that you're doing,
right.
which you've realized. Now, Rob, you've done it. You've reversed diabetes. How do you stay motivated to manage a well-balanced life, eating well? What are your tips?
Well, for me, being physically active is something that I really, really enjoy. And so, and it's great because that has an interplay on my desire to keep on looking after myself. So it makes me feel good. And that's, I guess, thinking about other patients, that's going to be a unique process, because some people just roll their eyes and think, I can't stand the thought of, exercise. And I don't like that word as a result. I think exercise has got a pretty bad rap, and we need to think about physical movement. And that can be something like walking to the train station, or it can be taking a walk with your grandchildren, or, it can be something like rowing on the Yarra. It needs to be fun. So exploring that is important. But for myself, I like going to the gym, and it's just something that I've really enjoyed. And so I find that I tend to do other things that help me look after myself when I do that. There's that knock-on effect of feeling good and wanting to maintain a sense of a healthy state that just leads to my other good health-related behaviours.
Apart from exercise, is there anything else that you do in terms of how you watch what you eat? Do you have to keep sort of reflecting on how the week went? For example, it's so easy to divert, especially if you've got social engagements, to sort of say, oh, maybe I'll sort of go off track a bit. How do you stay on track?
Yeah, really great question. So I always think it's important, we do actually use food not just as a fuel, but we actually do use food as a enjoyment. And so it's important, again, to acknowledge that and to talk about how is it that you're going to feel that you're enjoying your food while eating healthily. So I guess I always make sure that I've got little breakout foods that are not going to damage me. So there might be things like berries and cream rather than having ice cream in the house. I have the berries there ready to go. And also, I guess, make sure that food is really delicious, and so that's if ultimately, people sort of shudder quite often when you talk about healthy eating because they just think, oh no, rabbit food and this is not going to be a good experience. So just making sure that it is actually a good experience. Lately I've been exploring regenerative farms, and there's lots of farmers that provide pastured. I was just reading about pastured duck last night from a community farm that you can buy directly from, that delivers to your door.
Wow.
So, this kind of stuff is way more flavoursome than anything that you might buy in the supermarket.
Yeah.
It's good for the environment because it builds the carbon sink of the pasture.
Yeah.
It's good for the animal because they have a great life.
Exactly.
And it's good for us because it's got high omega-3s and it's delicious. Yeah. So there's just so many ways that you can actually explore these great food experiences.
And it's a really interesting comment because you actually developed a great relationship with food, and it sounds like you love it, you enjoy it. And I think many people sort of associate diets with they're going to take something great away from me. And I think that's really important to point out, that you actually make sure food is great and enjoyable, that you're putting good things in and obviously removing the bad in a way.
Absolutely, and the really interesting thing about that was my tastes actually changed as well, because back when I thought that animal fat was dangerous, I had developed this aversion to it, and the textural taste in my mouth of having something like that was put off. And I think on reflection that was actually due to this misconceived idea that fat's a dangerous thing to eat. And now I really enjoy it. If it hasn't got fat on it, then I'm not interested, And you realise that actually a lot of our palate is driven by these subconscious messages that we've been driven. And you can work on those. And it's important to just keep on challenging yourself as to what, your preconceived notions of healthy food are, and taste and palate, and keep on developing those things.
Before I finish my last question, is the low-carb diet for everyone? I mean, in general practice, would you advocate it to all of your patients? Who would you choose to advocate that diet?
Look, it's a good diet for almost everyone, and the only probable exceptions would be athletes that want a really explosive, powerful movement, so things like power lifters. Or sprinters, maybe AFL football players who need a little bit more carbohydrate to have that sprint take off. But apart from that, it's a fantastic diet for everybody, because even if you're well, even if you aren't overweight and don't have any diagnosed diseases, you're still going to improve your inflammatory state. It's going to calm. You're going to get a better body composition, so your body fat, your visceral fat will reduce. Your biomarkers for cardiovascular disease will improve. So anybody who's healthy will still get benefit. And what people almost universally report back is that their energy levels improve, their mental focus improves, their stamina during the day improves, and they just kind of feel a little bit less encumbered by needing to always eat because their hunger's suppressed. So I kind of think, it's just so amazing. It's like a big hammer. There's lots of nails, and sure, look, the more diagnoses and diseases you've got, the more benefit you'll fathom, because you'll see, being able to come off medications and things like that. But even for a healthy person, it's really quite a good thing to do. I guess the only thing is, if you have medications and diagnoses, then you need to be careful, because it is such a potent health move in terms of going low carbohydrate, you might end up being over medicated.
Right, that's true.
Once you start a low carbohydrate diet, whether it's for diabetes or for blood pressure. So it's best to do it with somebody, I guess, who has some experience with that transition towards a low carbohydrate diet if you are on medication or you have diagnoses.
And that would be your GP. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep, your GP or your specialist if you have a good relationship. And I guess, there's more and more doctors that are now becoming familiar with low carbohydrate nutrition and how potent it is. So hopefully that message is spreading through the medical community.
Fantastic. I'm dying to know, Rob, can you give me just an idea of what you ate for lunch and dinner yesterday?
That's a great question.
People want to know.
Okay. So I haven't eaten yet today.
Okay.
So I'm fasting so far.
Okay.
So I think that's a really great thing to do, is to just, I tend to, for me, I'd leave eating in the second half of the day. And so I leave that overnight and morning for the fast.
Yeah.
Yesterday was a lamb day.
Nice.
And I think it was actually some leftovers. I had just some lamb chops that had been braised in some, I think, mustard and sour cream, and then some sauerkraut. My really basic rule of thumb is to focus on a plant and an animal.
Easy guide.
Right, to the two food groups, and that's for some people, they need to tip that balance more in one direction or the other. It's a pretty simple approach, and try and vary what those plants and animals are.
Fantastic. Sort of made it quite easy, which is great. Now, before we leave you, Rob, why shouldn't we miss your lecture in May?
Sure. Well, what I really so the talk is all about reversing type 2 diabetes in clinical practice. So it's a focus towards the practitioner to help practitioners, give them a really practical step-by-step guide as to the stages of that process for the patient, all the way from, talking to them why they would bother, about the motivation and the benefits that they're going to get, all the way through to the beginnings, the midpoint, the maintenance phase, really focusing on the challenges that doctors face with their patients, and how to overcome those challenges. And also really focusing on the challenges that practitioners face in terms of, implementing it, and also just getting the little activities that are going to bring them the biggest impact for the patients. So just trying to get, sometimes it just takes a little line from a practitioner to deliver to their patient that makes all the difference. So really just getting the most out of the least amount of input.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rob, for your time. And so if you'd like to see Dr. Robert Szabo in May at the ACNEM conference, so please register at www.acnem.org. Thank you. Hope to see you there. Bye.